Welcome to The Explainer. Listen, if you own a home, especially an older one, you probably know that absolute sinking dread of walking downstairs and finding water or, something much worse, backing up right into your basement. It is literally a homeowner's worst nightmare. Well, today we're tackling a fascinating piece of home plumbing jargon that's actually gaining a ton of traction as a solution to this exact problem. We are taking a close look at what the industry calls an overhead sewer system. Now, I know exactly what you're probably thinking right now. Why on earth would you route sewage above ground? Honestly, the phrase overhead drainage sounds like a complete oxymoron. We're all conditioned to think that waste goes down and gets buried deep in the dirt, far, far away from our living spaces. So the idea of piping it above ground sounds totally counterintuitive, right? But as you'll see from the source material today, this engineering shift is actually a brilliant way to protect your property. So here's a quick look at our roadmap for today. 1. Defining overhead sewers. 2. The buried pipe problem. 3. Why Illinois homes upgrade. And 4. Installation and climate considerations. Okay, let's dive right into section 1, defining overhead sewers, and the what's behind above-ground drainage. Plumbing terminology can be incredibly confusing, so let's just get our facts straight right out of the gate. An overhead sewer, which is sometimes called an overhead drain or above-ground drainage system, is engineered so that your waste and wastewater piping actually travels through the home's upper areas or along accessible routes inside or outside the house. The absolutely critical distinction here is that it traverses these routes rather than being buried underground right from the start. We're basically taking the infrastructure out of the dirt and putting it somewhere we can actually see and reach. So how does that actually work mechanically? Well, it's not magic, it just relies on fundamental plumbing physics. The system routes drain lines above grade. But, and this is a big but, it still absolutely must maintain the necessary slope. Gravity is still doing all the heavy lifting here, so the pipes have to be angled perfectly using the proper fittings. Eventually, this whole above-ground system connects back to the main plumbing and ties into the municipal sewer or your private disposal route. It just takes a much safer, much more accessible path to get there. Which brings us nicely to section 2, the buried pipe problem, or as I like to call it, the nightmare of hidden infrastructure. And this brilliantly illustrates the core issue. To really understand why you'd want your pipes above ground, we kind of have to look at the physical and financial nightmares caused by traditional plumbing, because buried piping completely hides leaks and clogs until they turn into a full-blown disaster, right? It's incredibly vulnerable to things like tree roots crushing the lines, and if you have a tight lot, it's a nightmare to access. Now compare that to overhead piping. Because it's above grade, it's completely accessible for easier inspection. You avoid utterly destroying your yard, and diagnosing a simple clog doesn't suddenly require bringing in heavy machinery. We literally cannot overstate the immense pain points of traditional pipe replacement. When a buried pipe fails, you are looking at major excavation, which is highly disruptive and notoriously expensive. Plus, whenever you dig deep into a yard, you run the risk of hitting other utility lines, gas, water, electric. It's a massive logistical headache from start to finish. And this is exactly why an alternative is so desperately needed. Moving right along to section 3, why Illinois homes upgrade, focusing on regional challenges and aging stock. Regional challenges and older housing stock really do create the perfect storm for plumbing failures, which is exactly why we're seeing a huge rush to upgrade in places like Illinois. Aging drain infrastructure simply means older homes have older pipes that are starting to fail, and this leads directly to intermittent plumbing backups and water intruding into basements. If you have lower-level plumbing, like a basement bathroom for instance, it is incredibly vulnerable to city sewer lines backing up right into your home. Add in severe weather-related deterioration over time, and you've got a recipe for constant property damage. But hey, it's not just about stopping water, it's honestly about psychology. I absolutely love this quote from the source material. Easier inspection and maintenance can improve long-term peace of mind. Even if the initial cost to install an overhead system is comparable to excavating and replacing an underground pipe, the sheer psychological benefit of being able to physically see your pipes is huge. It completely removes that constant lingering homeowner anxiety of wondering what on earth is happening beneath the soil. Let's move to section 4 and see how this builds. Installation and climate considerations, otherwise known as the how of making the switch. Okay, so if you're sold on the why, here is the how, the stuff you absolutely must know before upgrading. First and foremost, you can't just reroute pipes on a whim. The engineering requirements are strict, requiring professional engineering and municipal permitting. Correct pipe sizing is absolutely mandatory for proper flow. And crucially, it demands a very precise venting strategy. To demystify that jargon for a second, plumbing pipes need air to allow water to flow smoothly. It's kind of like putting a second hole on the top of a juice box so it pours correctly without glugging. If the venting is wrong, the whole system just fails. So let this serve as a giant flashing warning sign. This is absolutely, undeniably not a DIY weekend project. Poorly planned venting or incorrect routing won't just be a minor inconvenience. It directly contributes to slow drainage, recurring clogs, and foul sewer odors leaking right into your living space. Nobody wants that. Plus, since we are talking about places with harsh winters like Illinois, we've got to talk about the freezing cold. Taking pipes out of the naturally insulated ground means they are suddenly fully exposed to the climate. So crucial freeze protection steps are required. You have to install the necessary insulation for all above-grade piping. In some cases, active heat management, like heat tape, is actually required. And finally, the pipes must be routed carefully to allow for the natural expansion, contraction, and the slight building movement that happens as temperatures swing from summer heat to winter freezes. So how do you actually know if this is the right move for your home? Well, a licensed drainage specialist is going to evaluate a very specific set of criteria. They'll look at your site conditions and your lot layout. They'll assess what materials your existing pipes are made of. They have to carefully calculate if you even have the available routing paths to maintain that necessary downward slope we talked about earlier. And finally, they'll determine exactly how it will securely connect to the municipal sewer system. Because sometimes, honestly, a trenchless repair might actually make more sense for your specific situation than going overhead. So, the truly crucial point here is this. The goal is not simply overhead versus underground, but a durable, code-compliant system that reduces downtime risk and protects the home. It's not about just following some new plumbing trend. It's about looking at your specific property and executing a solution that definitively stops backups and water intrusion from totally ruining your home and draining your bank account. Which leaves us with one final, provocative thought to chew on. Think about your own home for a second. Is your hidden underground infrastructure truly protected against the next major backup or the next really heavy storm? It might be hidden completely out of sight, but as we've learned today, it definitely shouldn't be out of mind. Understanding options like overhead sewers really empowers you to take control of your property's safety. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep asking the right questions about how the world around you actually works.